Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, "My boss treated me like crap, and he ended up paying with his career." Back when I was 15, I got a job working at a breakfast restaurant. I didn't really like it compared to my summer job, but I wanted to make money during the school year, so my choices are limited. My boss paid me below minimum wage, but the bus boys would get a very small percentage of the waiters' tips. After that, I would usually end up getting paid around $7 minus $8 an hour. But I always felt it was kind of cheesy because the waiters would make at least $150 in tips, and because I knew my boss was quite well off because he drove a nice car, his son drove a nice car, and his daughter that I went to school with drove a nice car. Now the money that would compensate for my wage was called tip share, and I would pick up the previous day's tip share after each shift. At first, I would always get paid what my tip share was, or rounded to the next dollar. As time went on though, things got more screwy. Our boss started pinching pennies wherever he could, and I got yelled at once because I was throwing away still wrapped straws that were still on the table. Okay, fine, these straws literally cost less than a penny each and it's more trouble than it's worth to save them, but whatever, I did it anyways because I was told to. I then noticed that I would get shorted a few cents on my tip share though. For example, if my tip share was $17.67, I would only get $17.60. This started to bug me for obvious reasons, but I didn't say anything about it. It got worse though. One day, my tip share was something like $23.51, and I only got $23. I then said, my tip share is $23.51, but then the manager giving me my tip share quickly walked out of the room while saying, "Oh, sorry, I don't have 51 cents. After that, even if the tip share was a few cents short, I would stick it to them and make them pay it. The first time I did this to my boss, he made me feel like I was begging for change. This went back and forth until I eventually got sick of it, and quit. I felt so defeated and hopeless. That's when I discovered TripAdvisor.com though. For those of you who don't know, TripAdvisor is a website that is open for anyone to leave a review on a restaurant, attraction, etc. This restaurant I worked for was in the top 10 out of 300 restaurants in my city, so you could say it was pretty highly rated. This is where my revenge starts to take shape. I realized that creating an account and posting one bad review with my new account will accomplish nothing. I needed a reputation, or reputations. I created 30 different accounts, and I started to slowly building up reputations. With these 30 different accounts, I made fake reviews, some good, some bad. I only did bad reviews on other places where the general consensus was that they sucked, and it took me a year or two to make everything seem normal, and I varied the amount of reviews each account made. By this time, my boss had actually expanded and had a second restaurant in a different location of the same name. I wreaked havoc on both of them, leaving around 2-star reviews on each restaurant. After I did this, more 1 to 2 star reviews started showing up that I didn't even write. The newest restaurant that my boss opened up ended up closing down, and out of curiosity, I went by the restaurant that was still open in a Sunday morning. The restaurant was a breakfast place, so Sunday morning was the busiest day of the week because everyone would go out to eat after church. It was nearly dead. I counted 4 cars in the parking lot. I don't think I've ever felt more satisfied in my whole life. The next one is titled, "One Tube of Superglue." Some backstory here, I'm a handyman on the weekends to get me out of the office and feeling like I'm actually producing something. Picture a compromise of office space. I've been doing handyman work for about 15 years on and off, and I'm really good at it. So I get a client who lives in Chicago and wants me to do some handyman work at some vacation rentals he owns in Hawaii. All 4 are neglected and, while they look nice, they need some real work. I agree, get a retainer and a service contract signed, and get to work. I usually do about 3 to 4 hours of handyman work each weekend, but this guy starts giving me work to do in the vicinity of 12 to 18 hours per weekend. And not handyman work, but errands and assistant work, drop off keys, put out and take in garbage cans, etc. This is not what I signed up for, but he's paying me, so whatever. I figure I'll get his properties up to par within a few months at this rate, and then it will be a simple hour or 2 a weekend to maintain. Unfortunately, his retainer runs out in about a month, so I send him an invoice and a request for more funds. I like to keep a little buffer in case my client tries to not pay me, and for the next 2 weeks I keep getting shitty answers. One day he says he wrote the check, the next week he says he finally sent it, a few days later he says he wired it to my account, etc. After a month of this I'm fed up. I sent him a final invoice for all the work with the notification that all work will cease until payment and a full retainer are paid, as stipulated in the contract. A few days go by, and I get payment for less than half the invoiced amount, as well as an edited invoice. He feels he shouldn't have to pay for a bunch of the stuff because he could do it if he lived here. Fine. I re-edit the invoice, noting a bunch of stuff as paid and the remainder as unpaid, will return materials or return to original condition unless payment is made. All of the items under this heading are small, such as door locks, cable wires, circuit breakers, etc. No word back after a week. Second notice sent. No word back. Final notice sent. He finally sends back that he paid what he was going to pay. I'm normally a very nice guy. If he had said that he was low on funds and maybe do a trade or help a guy out, no problem. But treat me like what I do isn't valuable, and we have a problem. So, I go buy a $5 tube of superglue, head up to the house, and get to work. Superglue in the locks of the sliding doors, keeping them locked. They lead to an amazing lanai overlooking the beach. Superglue the front door locks, keeping them unlockable. Superglue the window hardware to lock them closed. 1 or 2 dabs on each fan I repaired, a few switches, kitchen, living room, bedroom, leave the hallway and closet lights working, a few circuit breakers in the off position, and finally the cable for internet. I made sure it was only things I had repaired or fixed, but after 30 minutes, this place was essentially an unlivable sauna of Stone Age hell. $5 well spent. The next one is titled, Why Pre-Employment Criminal Background Checks Matter. About 4 years ago I was hired as a contract to hire for a position at a major IT storage vendor. I put in my 2-week notice but then got called by the account manager stating that EMC pushed back my starting date a week. No biggie, I end up getting a week off work, unpaid. So I close out my 2 weeks and on Thursday, I'm supposed to start the following Monday. I get a call from the manager of the contract house stating that there was some fraud involving my position and that it didn't exist. I'm like, what the hell? They explained that the contract manager basically made up the positions in the hopes of getting paid. Additionally, he ran up over $10,000 on the company credit cards. I told them they'd be hearing from my attorney as it was not my fault they didn't have proper checks on their staff and my job was with them, not the end client. My attorney contacts the contract house's insurance company and they won't start negotiating until my losses can be calculated, landing a new job. So I start my job search in earnest. In addition to looking for a new gig, I begin doing some work around the house, pulling up carpeting, painting and installing a new laminate floor. Fortunately, and since I knew I'd land a job and I'd get paid for my time off, I was able to borrow some money from my parents to get the stuff done. I start Googling the guy, and of course I find him, on an offender tracking system maintained by our state. I dig a little deeper and find he has an extensive criminal history dating back to the 80s. New gig and insurance company pays off. I start a new gig a month later while my attorney starts negotiating with the contract house's insurance company. They lowball me and I tell them to pound sand. When I forward the information about the contract house hiring a convicted felon, my pay for the job I left, the expenses I incurred and some smooth words from my attorney about having a sympathetic jury because I left a job I had and was now out of work thanks to negligence on the part of the company they were insured by, they settled for the time I was out of work, which was a month, COBRA, the pay at my new contracted rate, and miscellaneous expenses related to job seeking. Part of the agreement was that I would not speak ill of the contract house, and I won't. I really don't have any issues with them as they were honest about their F-up and made good with me. I paid off my parents with the check. I contact the contract house again and speak to the manager. At this point, since things are settled, he apologizes and says that they've changed their procedures, including background checks, as well as fraud checks on their corporate cards. He said the city wouldn't prosecute since the losses weren't large enough or verifiable. I point out that I was out of work a month. He tells me I'm not the only one. There were 15 other people that were victims of this guy's fraud, and 11 of them put in their notice at their current jobs, including one guy that had moved from California back to the Midwest. The revenge. At this point I'm upset at this guy. I'm very good about finding work. I've been laid off 4 times and never out of work longer than a month, knock on wood. But many of these people may not have been so fortunate. He ducked up so many lives with his fraud, and for the recruiting firm? They only lost money. I check this guy's LinkedIn profile a month or 2 later, and I find he has a new job, as an account manager at another recruiting firm. I call the recruiting firm and tell them the story as well as providing them links to his offender status. The manager tells me he just started 2 weeks prior and he was in orientation. They fire him immediately. He lied on his resume. They didn't perform a background check. They wondered why his resume listed as a HR generalist at the state prison, not knowing he was in the state prison. I'm all for giving people another shot, but this guy has an extensive criminal record with multiple convictions for fraud, theft, B&E, including a B&E after the entire mess with the last recruiting firm. Not to mention multiple stays in state prison. I check his offender status in my state. At one point he had absconded from parole. I haven't checked in a few months, but on Sunday I found out his offender status is clear and he's updated his LinkedIn. He's working for another recruiting firm. Time to give them a call. Update, somewhat anticlimactic. I called latest company he had listed on LinkedIn as a current job and spoke to the manager. I asked if I could speak with Mr. Criminal Account Manager, and the manager stated that he no longer works for the company. I then asked if he left any forwarding info. The manager said no. Then he asked if he could help me, and I told him, no, not really. I just called to tell you about Mr. Criminal Account Manager's criminal background. The manager responded with a chuckle and said, hey, yep. I'm thinking, okay, what does that mean? I asked if he knew everything and he said he couldn't elaborate. I left it at that. He's not there anymore and I'm assuming he was fired based on the manager's responses, or lack thereof. I will continue to follow this guy around the interwebs and ensure he never has an opportunity to F up someone else's life by working as an IT recruiter or account manager. The last one is titled, Lie to Me? Steal my work? Have fun going from $52K a year to minimum wages. Takes place back in 2014. I was about a year into my job and was being recognized for my talents and promoted pretty regularly. I was constantly being used as the liaison between my company and the client companies we had business and contracts with, and literally have saved our contract companies hundreds of thousands of dollars. Then I was approached by Amy, who was in another department, for a job opportunity in the next month or so. She was going out on medical leave and was going to train me to take over her position in the interim and then fully take it over once she came back and moved into a new role. I was ecstatic because I knew she had a salary position and that's what I really wanted. Most of the salaried positions in the company were the kind you had direct reports, and in my industry there is a lot of stupid and hand-holding. So I was not looking forward to have to deal with that stuff, but here was this angel offering me the salary I wanted and the stepping stone I wanted to get further in the company. All without having to deal with stupidity on a daily basis. So for the next 3 weeks I'm pulled from my current duties about twice a week to train in her position. In the beginning it was really menial stuff to get acquainted with her department, but then we started getting into the bigger Excel stuff. Now her job was 90% Excel based, but in having her teach me her job and the duties and deadlines for certain things, I realized she was basically flying by with basic Excel knowledge. I'm taking formulas to do math and VLOOKUPs were the majority of what she used in everything. Now I was really okay with it and knew I could bring a lot more to the position with my knowledge and really help out the management team and showcase my expertise to them. So she goes out on leave and I take over her position with no problem. I automate a lot of her duties during that time and implement a lot of new processes that optimized a lot of what she was doing. I find I have a lot of free time though, because I was better at Excel. Something that took her 2 hours took me 15 minutes, so I start taking some online learning courses my company offered in preparation of taking over the salaried position fully. She comes back from leave a few weeks later and this is when I start to realize I've been bamboozled. Amy officially starts her new role, Head of Quality Assurance, and I continue doing what I'm doing, with basically no feedback from her. About a week after she comes back I get called into her office and am basically told that the company is restructuring some positions and that the position she used to hold is no longer available, so no salary as promised. I'm disheartened by that, but she says she can get me at least a raise on my hourly rate and I can keep doing what I'm doing 4 days a week, and for the 5th day I have to do the same duties as the lowest folk on the totem pole. So no salaried position. I get to do all her old work for the promise of more pay, and I'm essentially starting at the bottom again at her department. I really needed a job at this point, so I went with it, and for the next 2 months I do my job even better than before, thinking at least the higher-ups will see my work ethic and performance and rewards will eventually come. I mean, I'm doing double what Amy used to do and sending her everything she requests for management, and I'm ranked the top man of the low totem pole workers. We get a new big boss soon, who is still the most amazing boss I have ever had, and she sees what I've been doing. She makes it a point to get to know all her staff, so she starts inviting me to the management meetings to see exactly what they need of me. Well, in that first meeting I find out that 90% of the management staff had no idea I was the one completing the duties and reports they were getting, and really had no idea what my job was. Amy had been pawning of my work as her own and was getting praise from them for being so great and essentially doing 2 jobs. I was livid, but again really needed this job, so I held my composure and just generally made myself available to the other management staff for whatever they needed. I cut Amy out of it. That went well for a while. I was being appreciated and celebrated for my work. I was getting more duties that were really freeing up some time for the upper management to focus on getting results from their teams, and I didn't have to deal with Amy much anymore. I was getting ingrained with the new client as well, so much so that they always reached out to me personally when an investigation needed to be done or a high-value customer needed to be reached out to. It felt as if I was really fully in this role now and was back on the path to promotion. The only thing missing was the money for the work I was doing. I was making the same, and sometimes less, money as the low folk on the totem pole when I was really starting to do managerial work. So I brought up my pay raise to Amy and she said she would look into it. 2 weeks go by and she advises that the company would not approve my pay raise as I was not technically in a position that warranted it. I was coded as a low man still. Something didn't feel right about that, so I went above her and brought it to the big boss. She was more than happy to see what kind of increase she could get me and told me that Amy had never even come to her to get the approval process started for my raise. So this was like the 3rd time she had lied to me. Not only that, the other managers started coming to me with requests for work that Amy used to do, only she never trained me on these things and wasn't doing them herself, so some things were not getting done. I sucked it up and went to her about the requests, but she said she would handle them. She still didn't want to give me all the tools to the castle to be able to do her old job fully. But again, I was smarter than her with Excel, so I just watched her folders closely for the completed information and basically backtracked the process to learn how to do it. I was getting pretty fed up at that point, but Big Boss was working on my raise and getting me back pay for the time I had been doing the work, so I stuck with it and avoided Amy as much as possible. Amy also had me start doing some stuff for her and her new department. I had built so many new things into our repository and access programs that some things could no longer function without me, as no one else knew how to run them. And through what I was doing for her, I learned her team was failing to meet their numbers and was just not providing the work they should have. About this time the client started to realize the same thing, thanks much in part to some reports Amy had me doing for her and sending to the client. I realized looking back at older reporting that she had been cooking the numbers essentially, and it looked as if our department as a whole took a steep dive when I took over, but my numbers were just telling the truth. So the client reached out to me in regards to that, so I explained my practice in full and the client realized I was giving an accurate portrait of how things were. I also learned during that client meeting that the head of the quality assurance department was expected to have almost a mastery level knowledge of the client and their processes. It clicked shortly after that Amy had never been properly trained on the client material. I had went through 4 weeks of client training when I moved over, but Amy went right from her first previous offline role, no real need for knowledge of the client and their tools, to the quality assurance role. Oh, now I had her. I spent the next week compiling all the instances of Amy reaching out to me for client knowledge and the timelines of her promotions, and then put the bug in the client's ear. The very next day a meeting was called by the client with all the heads of our department and Amy. It started with the client probing her about things she should know if she had been trained, and then ended with the slow realization that Amy was in deep crap because she knew nothing. By the end of the meeting, Amy was to be immediately removed her position and to have nothing to do with our client moving forward. And the client name dropped me specifically to help with her department in the transition. So this woman who had lied to me to get me to do her job, took all the credit for my work for a time, lied about a raise, and was just generally not the best manager, was about to lose her job. I was in heaven. But then she weaseled her way into another role as a front-line manager in another department with my company, and based on her previous role, they were happy to have her come help them with this brand new account. So she was taking a position downgrade, got to keep being employed, and her pay stayed the same. Oh, this would not stand. As I mentioned, she is just not a nice manager, and she previously cooked the books in her old role, so I knew she wouldn't miss the opportunity to do the same in her new role. So I waited and I watched and I collected first-hand accounts from people she was managing. And a little over 2 months into her new role, I dropped the biggest bomb of information on HR they had ever seen. Every single member of her team had numerous personal interactions with her that were unbecoming of a manager, and nearly every report she touched was wrong in some way. She had actually screwed up their efficiency report so bad for those 2 months that it appeared the account was doing so well in efficiency but losing money on the profitability side that it had management stumped. I got to expose her as an Excel fraud with this mishap. She cost the account thousands, her team hated her and put in a plethora of complaints against her, and my accurate reports showed by crappy her team was doing under her management. She was let go within 2 hours of my HR bomb. And in the end, Big Boss was able to get me my raise, and then some, and back pay of nearly a year, and my skills and hard work were noticed by all, and I was in line for a promotion. I have been in the promoted role for a year now. Lie to me, steal my work, lie to the client and management, and I will make sure 2 Fortune 500 companies will never let you near them with a 10-foot pole, and your reputation is ruined in our town and industry. I saw her working at Target a few months ago. Best satisfaction ever. Thanks for listening.